Under the cracked roof of an old coal town barn, a war veteran named Ben swung his hammer, just trying to make it through another day. But then, Buddy, his loyal German shepherd, froze. His ears perked, his body stiffened. Something was breathing beneath the floor. What could be hiding under boards laid more than a century ago? And why did it sound less like an animal and more like a cry for help? What Ben discovered next would test every scar he carried from war and uncover a secret that had been buried in darkness for generations. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of loyalty, redemption, and second chances. The night pressed heavy over the forgotten coal town, its sky low and gray, and the early winter wind carried the scent of dust and rusted iron across the empty fields. Ben Carter was 45 years old, broad-shouldered but carrying the weariness of a man who had marched too long under too many suns. His dark hair, streaked with early gray at the temples, was cropped short out of old military habit. A rough beard framed his square jaw, not out of style, but because mornings came harder these days, and shaving felt unnecessary when there was no one to impress. His eyes, a weary shade of blue, seemed to look past whatever was in front of him, searching instead for something long lost. He wore clothes that spoke of utility and poverty, a faded flannel shirt with elbows worn thin, denim jeans patched at the knees, and boots scuffed from years of labor. Once a soldier hardened by the desert's endless heat and the sting of gunfire, now he was simply a laborer, scraping by with odd jobs in a town that had forgotten itself. His hands, scarred and rough, still carried the strength of battle, but his spirit often drifted into silence. His companion, Buddy, a 7-year-old German shepherd, was his shadow and his anchor. Buddy's sable coat glistened when the moon caught it, shades of black and tan blending into a loyal form. His ears stood high, always attentive, and his amber eyes radiated a mix of intelligence and devotion. He had been trained, not as a military K9, but Ben had worked with him enough that the dog moved with purpose, as if he understood human pain better than most people. Buddy had been a gift from Sarah, Ben's late wife, given in a season when hope still lived. Sarah had been tall and graceful, with chestnut hair that spilled over her shoulders, freckles across pale skin, and eyes that laughed even when the world did not. She was a veterinarian, beloved for her calm voice and tireless patience. She had been killed 3 years earlier in a drunk driving accident that also took Emma, their 8-year-old daughter. Their absence lingered like a phantom, woven into every corner of Ben's life. Ben lived alone now, in a weathered house on the edge of town, the kind with peeling paint and a porch that creaked when the wind touched it. Behind the house stood the barn, a relic of his father's time, built of thick oak beams darkened by age. It had once stored coal mining tools and heavy wagons, and later his father used it for cattle. Now it was mostly empty, holding rusted equipment, dust, and ghosts. Ben had always respected the barn as his father's legacy, built strong enough to last centuries, but he never expected it to betray its secrets. That evening, the wind scraped across the roof, and Ben worked late, repairing a broken gate hinge. Buddy trotted near, nose twitching, tail sweeping slowly, the steady presence that kept Ben from sinking completely into solitude. It was then that Buddy froze, his ears pricked sharply. Forward, his muscles coiled, and a low growl rippled from his chest. Ben looked up from his hammer, confusion creasing his forehead. "What is it, boy?" he asked, but Buddy didn't move toward the door like he normally would at coyotes or raccoons. Instead, the shepherd fixed his gaze on the floorboards of the barn. At first, Ben thought it absurd. The floor was oak, laid by his great-grandfather more than a century ago. It had weathered floods, storms, and years of livestock pounding across it without complaint. But Buddy's paw began to scrape at the boards, nails clicking with urgency, the sound echoing in the hollow barn. Ben frowned, set aside his tools, and walked closer. That was when he heard it. A sound rose faintly from below, muffled yet distinct, a long, pained groan that did not belong to wind or wood. It chilled Ben because it sounded like a plea. He knelt, pressing his ear against the boards. The wood felt cold, and underneath it came the undeniable rhythm of breathing, heavy, strained, almost human. A second later, another sound followed, a whimpering cry, weak and desperate, that scraped at something raw inside him. Ben's chest tightened, memories of war colliding with the present. He remembered nights crouched in ruined buildings overseas, listening for the breaths of wounded comrades buried under rubble, the helplessness of hearing them cry out while bullets sang overhead. His hand trembled on the boards now, as though past and present blurred into one. He whispered, "Not again." The thought that someone, or something, was trapped below gnawed at him, but logic battled with fear. How could there be space beneath this floor? The barn stood on stone and earth. His father had told him countless times it was built to stand till the mountains fall. Yet Buddy would not relent. The dog's body was stiff, tail rigid, head low as he stared at a particular spot near the northwest corner. The growl deepened, not in threat, but in urgency, as if urging Ben to act. Ben exhaled slowly. "All right," he muttered, his voice rough. He reached for a crowbar leaning against the wall. The iron bar felt cold in his hand, weighty like the decisions he had carried all his life. He pressed the tip into the seam between two boards and pried. The wood resisted at first, creaking, groaning, then with a crack it gave way, splinters flying. Cold air wafted up from below, carrying with it a scent of earth and damp stone. He pulled up another board, then another. Each board revealed more of the darkness, until at last a rectangular opening yawned before him. Buddy leaned forward, nose twitching, ears high, eyes glowing in the dim light. From the void came the faint echo of a whimper again, soft but full of suffering. Ben felt his stomach knot. His father had always said the barn was a monument to their family's endurance. Now it seemed to be something else entirely, an entrance to secrets no one had spoken of. Ben's heart pounded as he stared into the black mouth of the tunnel, knowing instinctively that nothing would be the same after this night. Ben steadied himself at the mouth of the opening, the old wooden steps yawning down into a place he had never known existed. Cold air pushed up against his face, carrying dampness and the faint, metallic tang of blood. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and crowbar, then began the careful descent, Buddy moving close behind with a soft whine, as if sensing what awaited them. The beam revealed more than stone and timber. Against one wall, a man shifted weakly, his figure half collapsed, one arm cradling a twisted leg. At first glance, he looked like nothing more than a shadowed heap, but when his face turned toward the light, Ben saw the truth of him. Strands of dark hair hung wild across a pale forehead, dust clinging to the sweat there. His beard was uneven, patchy in places, as though weeks had gone by without a razor. His brown eyes flickered open and closed, dulled with exhaustion, yet holding a stubborn glint of awareness. "Don't come fast," the man croaked, his voice hoarse with thirst. "There's a trap." The light shifted further, and Ben caught it. The cruel steel jaws clamped around the hind leg of a wolf pup. The little creature, no older than a few months, trembled violently. Its fur was a mottled gray with a pale streak down its chest. One ear flopped, while the other stood straight, a detail that gave it an oddly vulnerable look. Blood darkened its leg where the trap bit deep. Its golden eyes, wide and desperate, darted between the wounded man and the stranger now standing in the chamber. The sound it made was not a growl, but a plea, high-pitched and pitiful, like a child asking for mercy. Ben crouched low, keeping his voice steady. "How long have you been here?" "2 nights," the man rasped. "Name's Tom Harris. Used to work the mine till it closed. Been scraping by ever since. I was looking for scrap, maybe shelter from the storm. Stumbled into this. Found the pup stuck." He tried to shift, grimacing as pain tore through his leg. "Couldn't leave it, but when I tried to pry the trap open, I fell. Leg gave out. Haven't been able to move since." Ben studied him carefully now. The man's frame was lean but strong, the kind built from years of swinging picks and carrying loads underground. His hands, though trembling, were calloused, scarred with old burns. Lines ran deep on his forehead, not just from age but from responsibility. There was weariness in his posture, yet also a stubborn refusal to surrender. He had the look of a man used to carrying burdens others never saw, perhaps broken by the mine disaster years back when several of his closest friends had been killed in a collapse. That loss clung to him even now. Buddy descended the last steps, nose twitching, tail held low in reassurance. He padded toward the pup with slow patience. At first, the wolf pup snapped weakly, its small teeth clacking in warning, but Buddy simply lowered his head, let out a soft whine, then leaned forward and licked gently at the bloodied fur. Something shifted in that moment. The pup froze, then sagged with a shuddering sigh, as if believing, for the first time, it might not die alone. Ben took the crowbar, wedged it under the trap's teeth, and with a grunt, forced it open. The pup whimpered as the metal jaws released, its body shaking in his hands. He tore a strip from his sleeve and wrapped the leg carefully. The little creature whimpered again, but did not fight, its eyes fixed on Buddy like an anchor. Tom let out a breath, closing his eyes briefly. "Didn't think anyone could manage that. You've got a gift." He fumbled at his coat and pulled free a battered leather notebook, its cover cracked and stained with years. "This belonged to my father. He always said there were tunnels under this town, from the Prohibition days. Whiskey routes, hiding places, things best forgotten. Thought he was just telling stories." He pressed it toward Ben with a weak smile. "Guess not." Ben flipped a few pages. Inside were sketches and notations, tunnels branching out like veins, some marked with symbols and strange ciphers. It was no idle doodle. Someone had mapped a network hidden beneath their feet long before either of them had been born. The pup shifted against Ben's chest as he lifted it carefully. Up close, its small heart thudded fast against his palm, its breath shallow but steadier now. Its mismatched ears and frightened eyes made it look younger than it was, and yet, when Buddy pressed close again, it licked at the older dog's muzzle as though pledging trust. "Come on," Ben said quietly. He slid his arm under Tom's shoulders and helped him upright. Tom groaned in pain, but allowed himself to lean against the veteran's strength. Together, they climbed the steps back into the barn, Buddy close at their side, the pup cradled gently in Ben's arms. The night air hit them with sharp cold, yet it felt cleaner than what they'd left behind. Ben stood for a moment, looking at the man beside him, the bleeding pup in his arms, and the faithful dog at his feet. Something had changed. In a single night, the silence that had haunted him for years had cracked open, replaced by connection. A stranger who needed him, a pup that had trusted him, and a secret from the past pressing toward the surface. Morning light seeped through the cracks of Ben's weathered cabin, casting long golden streaks across the wooden floor. The storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and the distant drip of water from the eaves. Inside, the air was thick with the sharp tang of coffee and the faint musk of damp clothes drying by the stove. Ben sat across from Tom Harris at a rough-hewn table, Buddy lying on the floor at his feet, his amber eyes ever watchful. The rescued wolf pup rested nearby on an old blanket, its bandaged leg trembling now and then, but its breaths had grown steadier in the night. Tom leaned forward, his battered leather notebook spread open between them. His fingers, calloused and scarred, traced the faded ink lines drawn decades ago. He had managed to wash some of the grime from his face, revealing more of his sharp features, angular cheekbones, a long, narrow nose, and deep-set eyes that seemed permanently shadowed by hardship. His hair, now combed back, was dark but streaked with gray at the temples, making him appear older than his 42 years. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but a faint tremor betrayed the pain of his injured leg. "These tunnels," Tom said, tapping the page, "aren't just beneath your barn. They run under the whole damn town. My father used to whisper about them, back when the mines were shutting down and men were desperate. During Prohibition, bootleggers carved out routes to move whiskey, hide crates, and keep revenuers at bay." Ben studied the sketches. Lines snaked across the page, intersecting with symbols that looked like crude compass marks. Crosses indicated chambers, some near the river, others beneath the old church. It was a map of another world below the town. He felt a knot form in his chest as realization sank in. His family's barn had not been built just on stone and earth, but above secrets meant to stay hidden. Tom rubbed his jaw, the stubble scraping against his hand. "Lately, I've noticed signs. Traps like the one that caught the pup, bait scattered near fences, rumors spreading about wolves attacking livestock. But the tracks don't line up. Too clean, too deliberate." He leaned back, wincing as his legs shifted. "Someone wants to blame the wolves, and I'll tell you why. Land around here has been worthless since the mines dried up. But if they can clear out what little wildlife remains and scare off the families who hold property rights, developers can swoop in cheap. I heard talk of a resort. Casinos, golf courses, all built on land they stole from people like us. Buddy lifted his head, ears flicking as though sensing the unease in the room. The wolf pup whined softly, inching closer to Buddy, pressing against the shepherd's side as if for protection. Ben reached down, scratching Buddy's neck absently while his mind raced. "Developers," Ben muttered. "And you think it ties to these tunnels?" Tom's eyes darkened. "I don't think I know. My father's notes mention hidden vaults, places where bootleggers stored more than whiskey. Some say gold, others old mining shares. That safe down there?" He gestured vaguely toward the barn. "I've seen it once, years back, when I was a boy sneaking through with friends. Rusted shut but real. If word of it gets out, people will do more than set traps. They'll kill to control it." Ben exhaled slowly. His calloused fingers flipped through more of the notebook, the sketches, the coded symbols. He remembered his father's stern silences, the way he avoided questions about the barn's foundation, or why certain stones were always off limits for digging. Maybe his father had known pieces of the truth, but had carried them like a burden too dangerous to speak aloud. Later that afternoon, despite Tom's injury, they returned to the barn. The air was colder inside, shadows stretching long across the planks. Buddy padded ahead, nose twitching, leading them back to the corner where the hidden steps lay. The pup limped along clumsily, determined to follow Buddy, as if unwilling to be left behind. The three of them descended once more. This time, Ben carried a lantern instead of just a flashlight, its glow painting the rough walls with shifting amber light. The tunnel stretched further than he had dared to go the night before, the wooden supports groaning under their weight. Dust clung to every surface, and the air smelled of age, mold, and secrets. After a quarter hour of cautious steps, they reached a chamber sealed by a wooden door, reinforced with rusted iron bands. The hinges screamed as Ben pushed it open. Inside was a room larger than the cabin above, its walls lined with stone and its corners piled with decayed crates. The scent of old liquor still lingered faintly. Against the far wall stood the object that froze them in place. A safe, tall and iron, its surface eaten by rust, but its shape intact. A relic of wealth hidden away. Tom limped forward, his lantern held high, eyes reflecting both awe and bitterness. There it is, proof. He struck the iron with his knuckles, the hollow sound echoing through the chamber. Bootleggers hid their treasure here. Maybe liquor, maybe gold, maybe papers worth more than all of it. And now, someone up there is willing to destroy lives to get it. Ben ran his hand across the safe's corroded surface, the cold iron chilling his skin. His chest tightened as he thought of Sarah and Emma, how greed and recklessness had already stolen too much from him. "If they want this," he muttered, "they'll come, and they'll stop at nothing." The wolf pup let out a faint yip, hobbling forward until Buddy nudged it back protectively. The chamber seemed to hold its breath around them, as though the very earth remembered the bootleggers' deals and whispered promises of hidden fortune. Ben straightened, meeting Tom's gaze across the dim light. For the first time, two men, scarred by different battles, understood they were now bound by the same one. Above them, the land was already being targeted. Below them, a relic of history pulsed with danger and temptation. Together, with a dog's loyalty and a pup's fragile trust, they would have to decide whether the tunnels remained a secret or became the center of a storm that could consume the whole town. The storm rolled back into the valley like an old grudge, its thunder low and drawn out, the rain pelting hard against the roof of Ben's barn. Darkness lay thick over the fields, broken only by the swing of lanterns carried by men who did not belong. Ben crouched low near the window, water dripping from his hair, his flannel shirt clinging to his back. Buddy pressed against his leg, ears perked, body tense. Tom, pale from his still mending leg, sat at the table behind them, his notebook open, a flashlight's weak glow falling over the pages. "They'll set the traps tonight," Tom muttered. His jaw was tight, the scar on his chin pulling as he clenched his teeth. "They always work in the rain, covers the tracks, drowns the noise." Ben's hands flexed unconsciously. "Then we'll get proof." They had planned it carefully. Tom would play the bait, limping along the edge of the woods as though drunk, carrying nothing but an old lantern. Ben and Buddy would stay hidden, recording with the second-hand camcorder Ben had dug out from his late wife Sarah's old veterinary office. still functional, though the lens fogged when it caught too much mist. The pup, though still healing, had grown attached to Buddy and whimpered when left behind, but Ben placed it in a crate lined with blankets near the stove. "Stay," he whispered, though his chest ached at the sound of the little creature scratching to follow. The men who came wore heavy coats slick with rain, the kind that swallowed their shapes. There were 4 of them tonight. At their head was Clayton Briggs, a man in his 50s with a hawk-like face, thin lips, and a narrow mustache that did nothing to soften the cruelty etched in the angles of his jaw. His slicked-back hair gleamed under the lantern light, rain dripping from the sharp bridge of his nose. He had once been a local businessman, known for lending money to miners at impossible rates, and when the mine closed, he turned to land schemes. His reputation carried whispers, families forced out of homes, debts collected with fists. Beside him trudged Virgil, a hulking man with a shaved head and shoulders broad as barn doors. His beard was thick and black, reaching his chest, but his small eyes betrayed a dull, eager violence. The other 2 were younger, one freckled with nervous energy, the other with scars crossing his cheeks as though carved in prison fights. They carried bags and tools, tossing bait near fence posts and sliding iron traps into mud. Ben's camera caught it, the sacks of raw meat, the deliberate placement near grazing lands. His hand shook slightly, but he steadied the lens, whispering, "Got it. We've got them." Buddy whined low, but quieted when Ben rested a hand on his head. Tom stepped out then, lantern swinging in his hand, his limp exaggerated. His wet hair clung to his forehead, his face hollow with fatigue, but his eyes were sharp. He staggered near the fence line, humming an old, mining song under his breath. "Who's there?" Briggs barked, lantern lifting high. His voice cut through the rain, sharp as steel. The younger men turned, eyes narrowing. "Some drunk?" Tom waved the lantern lazily, coughing. "Evenin'," he slurred. Briggs moved closer, suspicion narrowing his eyes. The others spread, circling. Ben cursed under his breath, lowering the camera. He shifted, trying to find an angle, but his boot slipped in the mud. He fell with a splash, the sound carrying. "Over there!" one of the men shouted. Ben scrambled, but Briggs's men surged forward. Buddy sprang like a bullet, his teeth flashing as he lunged at the nearest sack of bait. He tore it open, the rancid smell of meat spilling into the rain. Chaos erupted. Virgil cursed, swinging his boot at the shepherd, but Buddy dodged, ripping another bag and scattering its contents. The bait spread across the mud, blurring the careful setup into a mess. "Damn mutt!" Briggs snarled. In that instant, Tom lifted the old flashlight from his coat pocket and hurled it with all his strength. The flashlight struck the side of their parked truck, shattering the driver's window with a crack that echoed above the storm. The vehicle's alarm blared, headlights flashing wildly, illuminating their faces in strobe-like bursts. For a heartbeat, every detail was clear. Briggs's sharp nose and cruel smirk, Virgil's brutish jaw clenched in anger, the scarred man's twisted sneer, the freckles on the youngest one, who looked far more frightened than furious. Proof, if they could escape with it. "Run!" Ben shouted. He grabbed Tom's arm, dragging him toward the tree line. Buddy darted ahead, barking sharply, cutting a path through the brush. Behind them, curses rose as Briggs and his men stumbled in pursuit, slipping in the mud, blinded by their own flashing lights. The rain poured harder, soaking through clothes, plastering hair to their heads. Ben's lungs burned as he half-carried Tom, mud sucking at his boots. Buddy circled back once, snapping at Virgil's heels, before vanishing again into the dark. The wolf pup's distant cries echoed from the cabin, but Ben pushed forward, his chest pounding with the knowledge that they had what they needed, their enemies' faces caught in light, their hands caught in crime. At last they broke through to the cabin, slamming the door shut behind them, chests heaving, bodies dripping with rain and mud. Tom collapsed into a chair, clutching his side, his face pale but determined. Buddy shook himself vigorously, spraying water across the room, before trotting to the crate to nuzzle the pup, reassuring it with soft whines. Ben set the camera on the table, water dripping from its casing, but the tape inside safe. Proof. Evidence. But as he met Tom's gaze, both men knew the truth. Briggs and his men had seen them, their names, their faces, their dogs. The trap had sprung, but now the hunters knew exactly who stood in their way. The wooden church at the center of the forgotten mining town stood like a sentinel against the stormy sky. Its paint had long since peeled away, leaving the clapboard gray and weather-beaten. Tonight, lanterns glowed through its narrow windows, illuminating the benches inside, where nearly the entire town had gathered. Boots scraped against wooden floors, voices muttered low, and the smell of wet coats and coal smoke filled the air. Ben sat near the front, his palms damp against the camcorder resting in his lap. His chest felt tight, and though he had faced mortar fire and nights without food overseas, this was a different kind of fear. The fear of speaking to neighbors who saw him as nothing more than a broken veteran with nothing left. Buddy sat pressed against his knee, warm and steady, while the wolf pup hid inside a small crate tucked beside the pew, its golden eyes watching through slats. At the pulpit stood Reverend Samuel Price, a man in his 60s with a tall, spare frame and shoulders stooped from years of labor as much as prayer. His hair, once black, had turned a soft silver, and his lined face bore the look of one who had carried many burdens quietly. His voice, when he addressed the crowd, carried both gravity and compassion. "We are here tonight to hear truth. Mr. Carter has something to show us. Let us watch with open eyes." Ben rose, throat dry. He fumbled with the camcorder, the tape whirring as the image flickered to life on the sheet pinned to the wall. Rain and shadows filled the screen. Then the faces appeared, Clayton Briggs, Virgil, and the scarred men, caught under the flash of headlights, their hands placing bait, their eyes cruel and unrepentant. A murmur rippled through the pews. But when the video ended, the silence broke with anger. Jacob Miller, a stout farmer with broad shoulders and hands thick from years of soil, stood up. His face, round and red with emotion, glistened with sweat. "So what if they set traps? Briggs promised jobs, promised the resort would bring money. What do you bring, Carter? More empty barns and hungry mouths?" Others chimed in. A woman in a green shawl shook her head. "We can't afford to lose this. My husband's been out of work 5 years. We need something. Anything." Ben's hands shook as he clutched the camcorder. Heat climbed his neck. "I'm not asking you to give up hope," he tried, but his voice faltered. "I'm asking you not to trade your souls for lies." The words fell flat. Murmurs swelled into shouts, accusing him of wrecking their last chance. His vision blurred, his breath shallow. For a moment he thought of Sarah, how she used to stand before town meetings, steady and calm, explaining why stray animals deserved compassion. She had never faltered, but he was not Sarah. He felt the urge to sit down, to let it go, to walk away. Then Buddy rose. The German shepherd stood tall, ears sharp, and let out a bark that cracked through the chaos like a gunshot. The sound silenced the hall, and then, from the crate, the wolf pup pushed forward, limping on its still healing leg. It stumbled out, small body trembling, before curling at Buddy's side. Its mismatched ears and golden eyes stared out at the townsfolk with an innocence that words could not conjure. Gasps rose from the pews. Children leaned forward, wide-eyed, their mouths open in awe. An old woman with white hair pulled her shawl tight, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Mercy," she whispered. "Even a wild thing knows loyalty." The tide shifted. Tom Harris struggled to his feet, one hand gripping the bench for support, his face pale, but his voice strong. "If we let lies win, if we sell ourselves for a casino and a false promise, then we are no better than the darkness under those tunnels." His eyes swept the crowd, pain and resolve mingling in his weathered features. "I've worked with you all. I've bled with you. I've buried friends from that mine. We deserve more than another scheme built on broken backs." The room quieted. Reverend Price bowed his head, murmuring a prayer. Then Sheriff Daniel Brooks stepped forward from the back of the church. Brooks was a man in his early 50s, tall with a broad chest. His uniform stretched across strong shoulders. His square jaw bore the shadow of a trimmed beard, his dark hair flecked with gray. He was known for his fairness, but also for caution, rarely acting without certainty. Tonight his brown eyes were hard as he faced the crowd. "I've seen enough," Brooks said, holding up a folded paper. "This video, these traps, it's evidence. I'm opening an investigation." A murmur of approval rose, though still tinged with doubt. The doors of the church burst open then, rain sweeping in, and 2 deputies dragged forward a man in a soaked overcoat. His hair was thinning, his face sharp and hawkish, eyes full of fury. Roy Harris, Tom's older brother. Unlike Tom, Roy carried himself with arrogance, his chin high, his narrow mouth sneering as if everyone else were beneath him. His once dark hair was streaked with gray, his mustache trimmed neat, but his eyes burned with the cold greed of a man who believed money excused everything. Sheriff Brooks's voice rang out. "Roy Harris, you're under arrest for illegal hunting, setting traps without license, and land fraud. You've endangered this community for profit, and it ends tonight." Roy spat at the floor, his lips curling. "Fools! You think you can stop progress? You'll starve without me." But his words faltered when the wolf pup whimpered and the crowd turned away from him, their loyalty crumbling like rotten wood. Ben felt his knees weaken, not from fear this time, but from relief. For once, the truth had not been buried under lies, and for the first time in years, he felt Sarah might have been proud. Spring arrived quietly, its thaw loosening the frost that had clung stubbornly to the valley. The first green shoots pushed through cracked earth, and the air smelled of pine and damp soil. Where once lay barren lots and crumbling fences now stood scaffolds, tools, and the sound of voices lifted in labor. The abandoned parcel of land, scarred by greed and neglect, had been transformed into something remarkable, the beginnings of a community and wolf conservation center. Ben Carter walked across the field, his boots sinking slightly in the soft ground. He was leaner than he had been months before, his broad shoulders still carrying scars both seen and unseen. But his eyes held more light now, less of the hollow shadow they once bore. His dark hair, streaked with gray, fell longer than he used to allow, and his beard, trimmed neat, made him look less like a soldier out of place and more like a man settling into belonging. He wore a worn jacket with patches stitched by hand, gifts from townsfolk who had once doubted him, but now greeted him with nods and smiles. Buddy bounded ahead, his sable coat gleaming in the sunlight, muscles rippling with each leap. The wolf pup, now taller, stronger, its gray fur sleek and healthy, chased after him. The pup's once injured leg bore only a faint scar, a reminder of a trap that had begun this unlikely journey. Children laughed as the two canines darted between them, the pup's mismatched ears flopping as it tumbled joyfully. Tom Harris worked near the new fence, his leg mending, but still stiff. He wore a clean shirt rolled at the sleeves, revealing arms still strong, despite months of recovery. His once tired face seemed younger, framed by neatly combed dark hair streaked with silver. His brown eyes carried gratitude rather than defeat. In his hands he held the battered leather notebook that had belonged to his father, the pages fragile but still intact. He called to Ben, voice steady. "We'll set it here, where the tunnels breathe into daylight." The entrance to the old Prohibition tunnel had been braced with stone and timber, no longer a place of secrecy but of remembrance. Town miners had volunteered their skill to shore it up. Jacob Miller, once loud in his anger, now hauled beams alongside others, sweat streaking his broad face, his round cheeks flushed from honest work. When he caught Ben's eye, he grinned sheepishly. "Guess I owe you a pint, Carter. You were right. We needed hope, not another scheme." Women moved gracefully through the space, carrying baskets of bread, stews, and pies. Martha Green, a widow with hair the color of ash and a back still strong from years at the loom, ladled soup into bowls. She patted Ben's arm warmly. "Eat, soldier. You've given us reason to gather again." Children planted saplings along the path, their small fingers pressing soil over fragile roots. The Reverend stood nearby, blessing each tree with quiet words, his silver hair catching the morning light. The air was alive with the smell of pine, stew, and sawdust, an alchemy of healing. At the dedication ceremony, the townsfolk gathered at the tunnel entrance. Tom stepped forward, his posture straight despite his limp. He held the notebook aloft, then placed it reverently on a shelf carved into the stone wall inside. His voice trembled slightly. "This belonged to my father. His words led us here, but it's not just a record of tunnels. It's a reminder that secrets rot in darkness, but truth builds in light. Let this book rest here, so we never forget where we came from." Ben followed. In his hands was a weathered army cap, its brim frayed, its fabric stained by sand and sweat. He set it down beside the notebook, his voice low but strong. "This belonged to me. It carried me through battles I thought I'd never leave behind. but battles end. Today, I bury it here, not as loss, but as a step into the life Sarah and Emma would have wanted me to live. His eyes shone, not with grief alone, but with release. The Reverend nodded solemnly. The sheriff stood nearby, arms folded, his steady gaze on the crowd. Even Briggs's former accomplices, save Roy Harris, who remained behind bars, had been humbled into silence, their power stripped. As dusk approached, candles were passed hand to hand. Soon the tunnel glowed, not with shadows, but with hundreds of tiny flames, their light flickering across stone and timber, painting the once dark chamber in gold. The miners who once sweated underground now lifted voices in song, their deep tones joined by women and children. Buddy and the wolf pup darted among the crowd, tails wagging, chasing laughter instead of fear. The pup let out a long, high-pitched howl, still awkward, but answered by wolves in the distant hills. The sound rose above the valley, carrying strength and renewal. Ben stood among his neighbors, the warmth of candlelight reflecting in his weary blue eyes. For the first time in years, his smile came easily. He turned to Tom, who leaned on the fence, his brown eyes steady. "We didn't just save a wolf," Ben said quietly. His gaze swept the glowing crowd. "We saved this town." The people erupted in cheers, their voices rising with the howl of wolves, merging into one chorus of hope, of defiance, of love reborn. Under the dawn of a new chapter, shadows no longer claimed the tunnels. Light had won, not because of riches or schemes, but because men, women, children, and even beasts had chosen truth together. In the end, the story of Ben, Tom, Buddy, and the small wolf pup was never only about hidden tunnels or the downfall of corrupt men. It was about a forgotten town finding its way back to life, about neighbors who chose unity over fear, about the healing that begins when people dare to love again. The Community and Wolf Conservation Center stood not just as stone and timber, but as a living testament that even the darkest corners can be transformed when light is shared. Children laughed, old hands built, and voices rose in harmony. What was once a grave of secrets became a birthplace of hope. Maybe that is how God works in our lives, not always through thunder or grand miracles, but through small acts of courage, through the steady loyalty of a dog, through the kindness of a neighbor, through the faith that refuses to surrender. Ben's journey reminds us that the past can wound us, but it does not have to define us. When we stand together, when we choose truth, when we nurture rather than destroy, we create something eternal. So, dear friends watching this story, let it inspire you in your own life. Protect what is good, forgive where you can, build with your hands and your heart. If this tale touched you, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe so more stories of hope can reach others. And tonight, may we all say a quiet prayer, that God blesses your family with peace, strength, and the courage to keep the light burning, even when the night feels long.